I was not expecting my in-laws to make such a big impact on my life when I married Sarah. As a real estate attorney, I thought I had seen every property dispute imaginable in my 8 years of practice. But nothing prepared me for what happened after we bought our dream home. Sarah and I had been married for 3 happy years, and I initially had a pleasant relationship with her mother, Diane. Everything was perfect, until we signed those mortgage papers. Looking back, I should have noticed how intensely Diane stared at our new house keys. Before I tell you how my mother-in-law tried to steal our home with a fake lawyer, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever dealt with difficult in-laws. I met Sarah at my college roommate Jack's wedding 5 years ago. She was a bridesmaid with a warm laugh that caught my attention from across the reception hall. When our eyes met as she delivered her toast, I knew I had to introduce myself. Sarah teaches 3rd grade and has the most incredible patience I have ever witnessed. Her students adore her, and I fell just as hard for her compassionate nature and quick wit. Sarah is an only child, which I discovered played a significant role in her relationship with her mother. When I first met Diane, she seemed perfectly pleasant, if a bit overly involved in her daughter's life. After Sarah's father passed away from a heart attack 7 years ago, the two became even closer. Diane would call daily, and Sarah would visit her at least twice a week. I respected their close bond and tried to be supportive. When Sarah and I decided to buy a house together after 3 years of marriage, we were ecstatic. We had been saving diligently, cutting back on expenses, brown bagging lunches, and skipping vacations. My legal career was stable but not extravagant, and Sarah's teaching salary was modest. Every dollar counted toward our down payment fund. The house hunting process was exhausting. We looked at 34 properties over 6 months before finding the one. It was a 1920s craftsman-style home, with original hardwood floors, a wrap-around porch, and built-in bookshelves that Sarah immediately fell in love with. The house needed work. The kitchen was straight out of 1985 and the bathrooms required complete renovation, but the bones were solid, and the neighborhood was exactly what we wanted. I remember the moment we got approved for the mortgage. Sarah cried happy tears as we signed what felt like hundreds of documents. I had reviewed every page meticulously, both as a cautious attorney and as a first-time homeowner. We had scraped together enough for a 20% down payment to avoid PMI insurance, which meant emptying our savings completely. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The day we got the keys was one of the happiest of our lives. We brought a bottle of champagne to our empty living room and toasted to our future while sitting on the floor. Sarah talked about which bedroom would be the nursery someday, and we planned renovations we could tackle one at a time as our budget allowed. Diane came to our housewarming party and brought an expensive crystal vase as a gift. While everyone else was congratulating us, I noticed her wandering through the house, opening closets and checking out windows. At the time, I thought she was just curious about the place where her daughter would be living. Now I recognize it as the first red flag. "This is quite the investment," Diane commented when she cornered me by the refreshments. "How much did you put down?" 20%. "And what was the purchase price again?" I answered politely but vaguely. Something about her interest seemed off, but I chalked it up to her being overly involved in her daughter's life. Sarah had mentioned that her mother had always been interested in real estate but never pursued it professionally. Over the next few weeks, Diane began dropping by unannounced. She would bring small housewarming gifts each time: dish towels, potted plants, decorative items, which made it difficult for Sarah to turn her away. These visits always included a tour of whatever progress we had made on the house, with Diane asking detailed questions about our renovation plans, costs, and timeline. "You know this house has great bones," Diane said one evening, while running her hand along the crown molding in our dining room. "Property like this in the family is something special, something to be protected." The way she emphasized "in the family" struck me as odd, but Sarah did not seem to notice. She was simply happy that her mother approved of our purchase. Little did I know that those casual visits were just the beginning of a calculated campaign. About 2 months after we moved in, Diane offered to help with our kitchen renovation. While Sarah was thrilled at the prospect of her mother's assistance, I had reservations. My unease grew when Diane began criticizing every design choice we made. "That backsplash is terribly dated, Sarah. I cannot believe Thomas talked you into something so tacky," she said one afternoon, though the subway tile had actually been Sarah's choice. This pattern continued with every decision, from cabinet hardware to paint colors. Diane would undermine my input and attempt to drive a subtle wedge between Sarah and me. One Tuesday afternoon, I came home early from work with a migraine to find Diane in our house alone. She claimed Sarah had given her permission to wait there until Sarah returned from school, but something felt off about the explanation. "I thought I would just measure for those curtains I mentioned," she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You really should keep your financial documents in a more secure location, by the way. Anyone could find them in that desk drawer." The comment sent a chill through me. I had never shown Diane where we kept our important papers. After she left, I checked our files and found them slightly disorganized, as if someone had been looking through them. When I mentioned the incident to Sarah that evening, she became defensive. "Mom would never snoop through our things, Thomas." "She was probably just looking for a pen or something," Sarah insisted. "You have been so critical of her lately. She is just trying to help us." The first major argument Sarah and I had about Diane came when I discovered she had made copies of our house keys without permission. I found out when our neighbor mentioned seeing Diane entering our house while we were both at work. When confronted, Diane claimed she thought we had given her implicit permission as family. "I was just watering the plants," she explained to Sarah, eyes welling with tears. "I was trying to help, and now Thomas is treating me like a criminal." Sarah was caught in the middle, torn between her husband and the mother she had always been close to. Our once peaceful home became a battleground of tense dinners and whispered arguments after Diane would leave. "She is all alone since Dad died," Sarah would remind me. "We are her only family." I tried to be understanding, but my suspicions grew when I found Diane going through our mail one afternoon. She had arrived unannounced again and claimed she was just tidying up our entryway table. Among the scattered envelopes was our mortgage statement, which she had already opened. The confrontation that followed was ugly. I finally voiced my concerns directly to Diane, with Sarah present, explaining that while we appreciated her interest in our home, certain boundaries needed to be respected. "I think you misunderstand my position in this family," Diane responded coldly. "Without my help, you two would never have afforded this house in the first place." Sarah and I exchanged confused glances. We had saved every penny ourselves for the down payment with no financial assistance from anyone. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Sarah asked. "You did not give us money for the house." "Not directly," Diane said with a dismissive wave. "But who paid for your college?" "Sarah, who supported you during your unpaid student teaching. That money was meant to be paid back by including me in major financial decisions like this house." This revelation of Diane's expectations threw Sarah into emotional turmoil. She had never understood her education as a loan to be repaid with lifetime control. The argument ended with Diane leaving in tears and Sarah crying in our bedroom, unwilling to talk to either of us. Over the following weeks, the tension escalated. I discovered through a colleague that Diane had been researching property laws and asking questions about joint ownership and family claims to property. When I tried to discuss this with Sarah, she accused me of being paranoid. At family dinners, Diane began bringing up old family stories about relatives who had stolen property from one another, always with pointed looks in my direction. She would remind Sarah about the family cabin her father's brother had sold without family input, or the grandmother who had been pushed out of her home by uncaring relatives. Family property should stay protected within the family became her constant refrain. Our marriage began to suffer under the strain. Sarah and I, who had rarely argued before, now found ourselves constantly at odds. I felt isolated trying to protect our home, while appearing supportive of Sarah's relationship with her mother. Sarah felt pulled between her loyalty to her mother and her commitment to our marriage. The breaking point came when I overheard Diane on the phone in our kitchen when she thought I was still at work. I had come home early to pick up documents for a client meeting and entered quietly through the side door. "Yes, I am making progress on getting the house back," Diane was saying in a hushed tone. "Sarah is starting to see reason, and her husband is not as clever as he thinks. I have already spoken with Harold about the paperwork we will need." I slipped out without revealing my presence, my mind racing. That weekend, while Sarah was at a teacher's conference, I installed security cameras at our front and back doors and in our home office. I did not tell Sarah about them, immediately worried about causing more strain in our relationship, but I knew I needed evidence of whatever Diane was planning. Diane's behavior grew increasingly hostile toward me, while remaining sweet as honey to Sarah. She would make cutting remarks when Sarah was out of earshot, then switch to supportive mother-in-law mode the moment Sarah returned. The psychological warfare was subtle, but constant. Sarah has always been too trusting, Diane told me one day while Sarah was in the shower. Her father and I always knew we would need to protect her from people looking to take advantage. She is lucky to still have one parent looking out for her interests. The implied threat was clear. My suspicions that something bigger was brewing were confirmed when I found printouts of property transfer documents in Diane's purse when she left it unattended during a visit. The forms were blank but ready to be filled out. I took photos with my phone and replaced them exactly as I had found them, my heart pounding with the confirmation of my worst fears. Everything came to a head on a Thursday afternoon in October. I had a court appearance canceled at the last minute and arrived home 3 hours earlier than expected. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed Diane's car parked on the street, along with an unfamiliar luxury sedan with a world's greatest lawyer license plate frame that immediately set off my professional alarm bells. No legitimate attorney I knew would ever advertise themselves so tactlessly. I entered quietly through the side door and heard voices coming from our living room. I paused in the hallway listening. "We need to move quickly on this," an unfamiliar male voice was saying. "Once the paperwork is signed, the property transfer will be legally binding and your daughter's interests will be protected." I took a deep breath and stepped into the living room. There sat Sarah, looking pale and confused, along with Diane and a middle-aged man in an ill-fitting suit that was at least one size too small. His red power tie and slicked-back hair completed the caricature of what someone might think a successful lawyer should look like if their only reference was bad television. "Thomas," Sarah exclaimed, jumping up from her seat. "You are home early. This is Mr. Harold Bennett. He is a lawyer Mom brought to help us with some house matters." The man stood and extended his hand with exaggerated confidence. "Harold Bennett, attorney at law. Your mother-in-law has retained my services to help straighten out this property situation." I shook his hand while taking in the scene. On our coffee table were several official-looking documents with gold seals and ribbons, an unnecessarily theatrical touch that no legitimate legal document would include. "What property situation would that be?" I asked calmly, sitting down beside Sarah and placing a reassuring hand on her knee. I could feel her trembling. Diane spoke up, her voice sickly sweet. "Sarah, honey, I have explained to you how your father and I always intended to help you buy your first home. The money we provided was meant to be an investment, not a gift. Mr. Bennett has drawn up papers to reflect the proper ownership arrangement with me as co-joint owner to protect the family's interest." Sarah looked at me with confusion. "Mom says she and Dad always planned this, Thomas. That the money they spent on my education was supposed to be for a house down payment instead, and now she needs to be on the deed to make things right." I nodded slowly while discreetly removing my phone from my pocket and starting the voice recorder app under a cushion. "I see. And what exactly are these documents, Mr. Bennett?" I asked, picking up the top paper and examining it. The document was titled "Property Transfer and Rescindment of Deed" in bold letters with numerous whereas clauses that made absolutely no sense legally. "These papers simply acknowledge your mother-in-law's 25% ownership interest in the property," Bennett explained with practiced smoothness. Based on her contribution to the down payment through prior financial support of her daughter, I flipped through the documents, immediately spotting numerous legal errors. The property description did not match our house. The papers referenced statutes that did not exist. Most tellingly, the letterhead claimed Bennett worked at Bennett Morris and Stone Legal Associates, a firm I had never heard of in our metropolitan area. "This is quite interesting, Mr. Bennett," I said. "Could you explain the legal basis for this claim? I am particularly curious about your interpretation of the statute of frauds as it applies to verbal agreements regarding real property." Bennett's confident smile faltered slightly. "Well, family law creates certain exceptions, of course. The precedent in the Johnson case clearly established." "Johnson case?" I pressed. "Would that be Johnson v. Peterson from the Ninth Circuit, or perhaps the Johnson Real Estate Trust case from our state Supreme Court?" Neither case existed, and Bennett's face began to flush as he tugged at his too-tight collar. "Perhaps you could share your bar number with me. I would like to review some of your previous work in this area of law," I continued pleasantly. "That will not be necessary," Diane cut in sharply. "We need to focus on getting these papers signed today. I have a notary waiting to meet us in an hour." Sarah was looking increasingly distressed. "Mom, you never said anything about owning part of our house before. We saved for the down payment ourselves. I do not understand why this is happening now." Diane turned to Sarah with tears in her eyes. tears I now recognized as completely manufactured. Darling, do not you remember? When we talked about your future, your father and I always said we would help you with a house. Thomas has turned you against me, made you forget your family obligations. I never agreed to put the house in your name, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. We bought this house together, Thomas and I. I decided it was time to push harder. Mr. Bennett, could you explain the specific consideration being offered in exchange for this ownership transfer, and perhaps cite the relevant property statutes that would enforce a verbal agreement made years ago with no documentation? Bennett shuffled his papers nervously. The consideration is the previous financial support, as I mentioned. As for statutes, the Family Property Protection Act of 2019 clearly states that parental contributions. There is no such act, I said calmly, and I am curious about something else. Your letterhead lists your office at 855 Oakwood Boulevard, but that address is actually a car wash. I drove past it just yesterday. The room went silent. Bennett's eyes darted to Diane, who was glaring at him with undisguised fury. We have recently relocated, he stammered. The letterhead is outdated. I see. And your bar number again, was I pressed? We do not have time for this interrogation. Diane snapped, standing up. Sarah, I need you to sign these papers now. Your father would have wanted this. Actually, I said, reaching for my phone, I think we should all take a moment to review what has been said here today. I stopped the recording and played back the last minute of conversation. I have been documenting this entire interaction, which could be very interesting to the actual bar association. Bennett suddenly stood, gathering his papers hastily. I just remembered another appointment. We should reschedule this meeting for another time. Wait, Sarah said, her voice hard with growing anger. I want to understand exactly what is happening here. Diane grabbed her purse. This was a mistake. That husband of yours is twisting everything as usual. We will discuss this later, Sarah. As they moved toward the door, I knew it was time to reveal the truth. Mr. Bennett is not a real lawyer, I announced clearly. And I can prove it. The room went completely still. Harold Bennett froze with his hand on the doorknob, and Diane's face drained of color. What are you talking about? Sarah asked, looking between us all. I walked to our sideboard and took out a folder I had prepared after overhearing Diane's suspicious phone call. Harold Bennett failed out of law school at Coastal State University in 2010 after 3 semesters. Never passed the bar exam because he never completed his degree. Has been cited twice for unauthorized practice of law in neighboring counties. I placed a printed background check on the coffee table. Currently works at Magnolia Insurance as an administrative assistant, not as an attorney. Bennett's shoulders slumped. He did not even bother denying it. Is this true? Sarah demanded, standing up. Are you even a lawyer? Bennett looked at Diane, who was glaring at him with undisguised fury. I told you this was a bad idea, he muttered to her. I told you he might check. I went to our laptop and pulled up the footage from our security cameras. 3 days ago, you both entered our house when we were at work. You spent 45 minutes going through our home office. I played the crystal clear video showing Diane unlocking our front door and ushering Bennett inside. You searched through our files, took photos of our deed and mortgage documents, and made copies of our personal financial information. I continued advancing through the footage, all of which is illegal breaking and entering, not to mention attempted fraud. Sarah's expression had transformed from confusion to horror to rage. Mom, how could you do this? You tried to steal our house. You brought a fake lawyer to trick me. Diane attempted to regain control of the situation. Sarah, you are misunderstanding everything. I was only trying to protect you. Thomas has manipulated you from the beginning, isolated you from your family. I needed to ensure you were taken care of. By committing fraud, I asked calmly. By hiring someone to impersonate an attorney. By attempting to coerce your daughter into signing away her property. I turned to face Bennett directly. Practicing law without a license is a felony in this state. It carries penalties of up to 5 years in prison and fines up to $50,000. Add breaking and entering, attempted fraud, and conspiracy charges, and you are looking at serious jail time. Bennett's face went ashen. Look, I just did what she paid me to do, he said, pointing at Diane. She said it was just a family matter, that no one would check my credentials. She did not tell you I am a real estate attorney, did she? I asked. The look of shock on his face told me everything I needed to know. "You are a lawyer," he choked out. 8 years practicing real estate and property law. Currently a senior associate at Harrington Williams and Taylor downtown. Bennett sank into a chair, head in his hands. "I cannot go to jail. I have kids." Sarah had been staring at her mother with growing anger. "How long have you been planning this? Was any of your interest in our house genuine? Or was it all about taking it from us?" Diane tried one last manipulation. "Sarah, darling, everything I have done has been for you. Thomas has turned you against me. After all, I sacrificed for you, raising you alone after your father died. Dad would be ashamed of what you are doing." Sarah cut her off coldly. "He would never have tried to steal from his own daughter." Diane's face hardened. "Your father was weak. He would have let you throw away your future on this gold digger. I was trying to secure your inheritance. By stealing the house we worked years to save," for Sarah's voice broke. "By lying to me, by breaking into our home, I placed an arm around Sarah's shoulders. Here are your options, Diane. Option 1. You and your fake lawyer friend leave now. You sign this document I have prepared acknowledging you have no claim to our property. You stay away from our home and respect the boundaries Sarah sets moving forward. In return, we do not press criminal charges." "Or option 2, Diane asked, her voice brittle. "I call the police right now. I file charges for breaking and entering attempted fraud conspiracy, and I report Mr. Bennett to the Bar Association and District Attorney for impersonating an attorney. I have all the evidence I need on video and audio recording." Bennett looked pleadingly at Diane. "Please just sign whatever he wants. I cannot afford to go to jail." Diane's cold facade finally cracked. "This is extortion." "No, this is mercy," I replied. "For Sarah's sake, not yours." Sarah stepped forward, tears streaming down her face, but her voice steady. "Sign the paper, Mom, and then I need you to leave. I cannot even look at you right now." Diane stared at her daughter for a long moment, perhaps finally realizing the magnitude of what she had done. Without another word, she snatched the pen I offered and signed the document renouncing any claim to our property. "Sarah, when you come to your senses, call me," she said, gathering her purse. "This is not over." "Yes, it is," Sarah replied firmly. "You tried to steal our home. You lied to me my entire life about your support being alone. You violated every trust. I need time to decide if I ever want you in my life again." As they left, I held Sarah as she broke down completely. The weight of her mother's betrayal crashed over her in waves of grief and anger. Our home, which had been our dream, had become the centerpiece of a nightmare neither of us had seen coming. 1 year has passed since that terrible day. Sarah and I have spent a lot of time rebuilding our sense of safety and trust. The first few weeks were the hardest, with Sarah cycling through grief, anger, and confusion about her mother's actions. We decided together that pressing charges would only prolong our pain, so we focused instead on healing and moving forward. We changed all our locks, installed a comprehensive security system, and I helped Sarah establish firm boundaries with Diane. For the first 3 months, Sarah chose no contact, needing time to process everything. When they finally did speak again, it was through a family therapist who specialized in estrangement and reconciliation. Diane's initial refusal to acknowledge the severity of her actions nearly ended their relationship permanently. It took a stern reality check from the therapist about potentially losing her daughter forever to finally crack her defensive shell. Her apology, when it eventually came 6 months later, was imperfect but sincere. "I lost myself. After your father died," she admitted to Sarah during a supervised session I attended. "The fear of losing you too made me try to control everything. It does not excuse what I did, but I am truly sorry for betraying your trust." Sarah has been remarkably strong throughout this process. She established clear, non-negotiable boundaries. Diane can visit only when invited, never has access to keys, and financial discussions are completely off-limits. Their relationship is tentatively healing, but it will never be the same codependent connection it once was. The experience changed me professionally as well. I have started taking on pro bono cases for victims of real estate fraud, particularly elderly people and immigrants who are often targeted. The skills I used to protect our home can now help others keep theirs. Our house has transformed from a source of pain to a symbol of our resilience. We finally renovated the kitchen ourselves, without outside help, choosing exactly what we wanted. Each room reflects our journey, strong, authentic, and built on a foundation of truth rather than manipulation. The most beautiful transformation has been in our marriage. Crisis reveals character, and Sarah's strength through this ordeal has deepened my respect and love for her. Standing united against manipulation taught us how to communicate more clearly and support each other more effectively. As I sit on our porch swing writing this, I can see Sarah in the yard planting a garden that will bloom next spring. We are expecting our first child in 4 months, a daughter, and the nursery is ready in the room Diane once tried to claim as a guest room for her frequent visits. If this experience has taught me anything, it is that protecting what matters sometimes means making difficult choices about who gets to be part of your life and on what terms. Sometimes the strongest foundations are built after the worst storms, and the most important property rights are not about deeds and titles, but about the boundaries that protect your peace. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who crossed major boundaries? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need encouragement in setting healthy family boundaries. Thanks for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you are born into.